By the way, to the listeners, this should be a tip off. To do this stuff, you cannot be like a weakling. Like there is a conditioning inherent to this stuff that you build up, and like you're strong in a certain way, but that also allows you to relax.
I think Chris shows this later on. I'm probably getting a little ahead of ourselves too, but kind of like the kind of foot in the door type exercise that you see some people talk about is letting the force kind of reflect off the ground. And it's not that hard to do. Just basically, what you want to do is you don't want to resist the force. You let it passively pass through your body. You let it go into the feet, and it essentially reflects off the ground, kind of like Newton's third law. So that's what I think he's trying to say.
Yes.
But I don't think that's what is being demonstrated here.
And that was brought up in another forum correctly, where they're like, you're trying to analyze this in terms of force vectors, but you're leaving a lot of other things, and you're not even getting the force vector thing right, because you're actually not doing it correctly.
Right. All right, so let's continue a bit here.
Between the two. So while Josh is pushing directly into me this way, I'm pushing up against him, and it makes me seem really strong. There was a woman who went all around the world showing these demonstrations back at the turn of the century. They called it the Georgia Magnet. There's actually several different variations that showed these different kinds of demonstrations. And basically, force angle was her #1 trick, right? She did a few other things, but force angle was her #1. And force angle is really, really deceptive when you're doing that. Now, force angle can be used in another way, and we use it all the time when we do the demonstration. So, like, if Josh pushes into me like this, and he pushes into me, right, and I'm really stable, this is also force angle. Now, this is working in a different way because what I'm doing...
So, just to pause here for a second, this is kind of, if he did it and explain a certain way, this is kind of what I was talking about before, how you let passively go through your body, and how, typically people will let it go into the rear foot. One of the problems, though, when you do that is that you can start to actively push against it or brace against it. Chris doesn't go into that, but this is what he's trying to explain right here.
And then you're keeping the force out of the shoulder is actually the main sticking point for everybody. Anybody that even uses this model where you passively pass the force to the rear foot, how do you keep it out of the shoulder? That's, a roadblock for a lot of people.
Yep. And of course, that's the simple end of the door method. There's all sorts of things that you can do to that. You can split it between different legs. You can let it go up to the front leg, which changes the direction that the other person feels. And, I don't think Chris, he kind of says, okay, you get that upward force, but he doesn't really say what it feels like for the other person. And, what they will feel is they will feel like someone is coming up from underneath them, and then, not necessarily like actively pushing up with them, but they can just feel that like something is being sourced from below them and it's going back upwards.
It's because you're pushing the floor.
Exactly.
I remember way back when I used to attend Sam Chin's class, way before I met Akazawa Sensei. Sam used to talk about it. He'd be like, when you push the hand, you cannot, you are not pushing the hand, you're pushing the floor. If you're pushing the floor, how can you win? It's like, oh, okay. I mean, for me, back when, I was like, geez, like 19, 20, I was just like, oh, duh, yeah. God, I'm retarded. I go to an engineering school.
Well, I mean, it does feel really, really solid, but I remember, Rob, we had a discussion a long time ago, and maybe it was Ark that said this. It's like, well, we're talking about sourcing power lower and lower and lower, and how you really can't get any lower than the ground itself. But what can you do to make it stronger than that? And well, there's ways of routing it down and adding to it and balancing.
There's ways of nullifying it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, one of the things that we do is that we don't necessarily have the person feel the ground. I mean, you can if you want, I guess, but we're looking not from the feel the ground, but actually to feel nothing at all.
I was talking with a friend who worked with supposedly like a really high level Wu Tai Chi guy. And he said that this guy was the only guy that he ever felt that was like close to arc. And what was interesting was that this guy, and by the way, he used to be a factory worker, so he was pretty well conditioned, which, by the way, to the listeners, this should be a tip off. To do this stuff, you cannot be like a weakling. Like there is a conditioning inherent to this stuff that you build up, and like you're strong in a certain way, but that also allows you to relax. But getting back to the point, this particular instructor said, don't ever let the force come into your feet, because if you take the force in and you take it to the sole of the foot, if they're good, then they will own you, basically, which is actually what Ark wants. He actually wants you to like try to get under, because then he'll try and use that against you, because that's the typical thing that they'll teach in Chinese martial arts 101 is first get lower. That can be shown really quickly.
Yep. You can pick it up pretty quick. And just to build on your point, Rob, I was translating for ARC one time. I think actually at the Seattle seminar, and my Japanese is okay. It's not anything amazing, and I kind of made the mistake of maybe adding a little bit to what he was saying based off my own knowledge, and he was like, "No." He's like,
I can already see it in my mind. He'd be like, what?
いや、ハンター、それ違うでしょ。
So, all right, so let's continue a bit here.
I'm allowing that force to come in as straight into my body as I can and be into the ground, right? So the force angle of this Joe right now is really good. It's really strong. So if I push down into it, I can't push it down because it's so strong. And essentially, when I'm resisting Josh like that, this is what I'm doing. I'm kind of lining this up. Now, it would be perfect.
You see, he's actually still leaning there.
If I put my feet against the wall and completely resist him, I'd be really strong. Or if Josh stood on my shoulders, the force would go perfectly down into the ground. I'd be really strong, right? I'd seem very, very strong. But it's just the angle of the force. I'm allowing that force to come into a way that I'm super, super stable. So that's also a demonstration of force angle.